These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs. We are proud to stand with you.
The success of tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal, Television for Agricultural Business Decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Bryce Duskett, and thank you very much for joining us today on Market Journal. Can you believe it? We're already nearing the end for the month of May. Rain has been falling across portions of Nebraska this week, and it's been way too much in certain areas of eastern Nebraska. We'll begin today's show by checking out these photos of the week from Quentin Keneally of Tekamah. We had him on the show here last year. He posted this first photo on Twitter, though, saying it was on May 20th, corn was planted and beans were 91% complete. But the next day, as you can see, Mother Nature had a different idea. 5 to 6 inches of rain fell on his farm. Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Eric Hunt will be joining us here in a bit to share an update of what might be ahead when it comes to weather in the next week, hopefully less volatile. Also on this week's broadcast, the Yider Institute held a fireside chat with the Canadian Minister of Innovation to discuss the U.S. and Canada trade relations. We'll get details of that exchange. Plus, we'll check in on planting progress with one of Nebraska's premier popcorn seed operations near North Loup. That story is coming up in a few moments as well, but we begin here. As we're nearing the month of May, some exciting events coming up for June that you won't want to miss. That includes the 2024 Heard That Conference, which is presented by the University of Nebraska's Women in Agriculture program. The Nebraska Women in Agriculture program, along with the Nebraska Beef Quality Assurance program, set to host the 4th annual Heard That Conference next month. Beginning June 10th through the 11th, participants at the event will learn from industry experts as well as University of Nebraska Extension professionals through several hands-on workshops.
Heard That is typically focused on the livestock production sector of the ag industry, but this year we decided to narrow our focus even deeper, and we're going to really dive into beef cattle reproduction. So anyone out there that wants to make sure that they have all the current knowledge, all of the current best practices to really improve the reproductive practices on their operation, this year's Heard That is a great learning opportunity. Our program is broken into 2 separate days. Monday, June 10th, we're going to start off in the late afternoon with a tour of TD Angus, and they are a seed stock production located just outside of North Platte, and really learn about some of the new technology that they're implementing in their program. And we'll follow that up with dinner and a keynote speaker. We were lucky enough to nab Taryn Dreiling as a keynote speaker, and she's going to come in and talk about how we can use some of those animal handling techniques that we've all kind of learned as best practices to also filter into our business operations, working with our families. It's going to be a really engaging keynote. So if you're available for Monday night, I think we're going to have a great time. But Tuesday is going to be our really heavy content and instruction day. We've got workshops all day that are a fabulous mixture of hands-on and some classroom style learning. We've got workshops on ultrasounding and really the anatomy of artificial insemination, but we're also offering a BQA training and then some hands-on practicing of the safe handling of hormones. You know, I think especially as female producers, we're handling a lot of these reproductive hormones, but there are some special considerations that we need to make sure, some precautions that we're taking. And we're really going to dive into that.
The Women in Ag Heard That Conference, again taking place June 10th and 11th at the West Central Research and Extension Center in North Platte. You can still take advantage of the early bird registration, which is $125 for the full conference and $75 for one-day registration. You can do so to the end of the month. Prices for registration will go up on the 1st of June to $150 for full conference and $90 for one-day registration. For more information or to register, visit wia.unl.edu/heardthat. Up next, it's time to get a look at how things are shaping up for our in-state ag producers as we head out and into the field. This week, we're visiting with popcorn seed producer Josh Zangger from North Loup, Nebraska, checking in on how his spring planting season's been going for them. Josh, thank you very much for the time. Give us some background on your operation.
Yeah, the operation W.O. Zangger and Son was incorporated in 1954 by my great-grandfather. He first started with Polled Hereford, had the first registered breed of Polled Hereford. And at that time in the 1930s, he started growing popcorn also. He grew that for, I believe, a group out of Denver, Colorado, Fox Intermountain Theaters. This area in Valley County from Burwell down to St. Paul had almost 5 processing companies that processed popcorn and sold it. In the 1937 USDA Digest, this area produced almost 50% of the total popcorn needs and consumption by the United States. So there is a rich background of growing popcorn in this area. So my father, Charles, started breeding popcorn in the early 1980s. And the main goal at that time was to create varieties that were shorter season, where that could be grown further north. They would mature properly and not get a frost, which is what he ran into. So that is our main goal today. Is we produce popcorn varieties for different growing locations and for different market traits, like theater popcorn, microwave popcorn, popcorn that is in a ball shape to be coated. So that's primarily our main purpose here.
What does marketing look like on your operation? Where is the final destination of your product?
Sure. Yeah, we first started in Nebraska, and then from there we branched into other popcorn growing states, which would be like Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Illinois. And then from there we developed some good partnerships overseas. So we ship to about over 30 different countries. And then we have distributorships like in Europe, South Africa, to name a few, where they distribute to other countries. So sometimes we're not even sure completely where our whole outreach is, but we do ship quite a bit internationally.
So how has planting season been going for your crew this year?
Yeah, pretty good. You know, we started with kind of a warmer winter, followed by kind of a cooler, rainier start to the spring. So we got a little bit behind just in our here with our nurseries and stuff with the rain, but it was also good to get the rain. And we planted out west first, which is usually opposite for us. So we just, like any year, you know, Mother Nature, part of agriculture is being flexible to the environment. So we're catching up right now, but so far it's been a pretty good spring.
I noticed that planter behind you. How does planting on your operation differ, perhaps from a traditional operation?
Well, for any grower that's actually growing popcorn, there's not a lot of difference for them. Use the same planters, same combines. They use less inputs typically, less fertilizer, less water, a little bit different pay structure, but not a lot of difference. For us as a seed company, we have to conduct a lot of research. So every year we test almost up to 2,000 different varieties of popcorn. So what you're looking at is a research plot planter made by a company in Kansas. SRES is the type of planter. And with that planter, we're capable of doing what we call research plots. So we can plan a plot that may have 500 different varieties, and we may have those be 4 rows, 40 feet long, or 2 rows, 20 feet long, and we can do that throughout a whole field or a section of the field. And what this allows us to do is check each one of these varieties for not only agronomic traits, but quality traits that allow us to pursue the next best variety.
So what is the key to growing good popcorn?
Well, the key to growing good popcorn, really it starts with location. And Nebraska happens to be one of the best places to grow popcorn, especially central to western Nebraska, northern Nebraska. That is because we tend to have higher elevation, we tend to have less fungal diseases, we have good irrigation, we have good growers, and we have the right environment, especially in August and September, to help basically finish out or cure the popcorn and help it dry down, which is a key part to having good quality popcorn.
Thanks to Josh and the folks at Zangger Popcorn for hosting our crew on their site. We'll be checking in with them maybe a little bit later in the growing season to see how their crop is progressing. Up next, we take a look at what's happening when it comes to the markets. Joining us on the desk is Jeff Peterson, the president of Heartland Farm Partners. Good to see you, Jeff.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Let's talk about these markets. I guess maybe let's go back to the last 30 days and size up some of the factors of what's been happening, particularly for corn and soybeans. What's driving this?
Yeah, so if we just kind of sit back and take a look at a big picture, if you really kind of think about it, in particular in the corn market, over the last month, we've kind of been in a gradual uptrend. And if you kind of think back in time, well, what kind of changed in there? Well, we kind of had some weather come in there that gave us a planting window early, and then it's like it kind of took it away and gave us some challenges. Meanwhile, all during that time, we ended up having basically the weather wasn't cooperating. The speculative traders were trying to decide, hey, do they want to be long this market or short this market? And then as the technical action was happening in the market, it was showing us some ideas in there from the technical side that, you know, they should step in and be a buyer. And so we're kind of balancing that tightrope between, do we have enough moisture? Is the planting progress going fast enough? Do we have enough demand out there? But meanwhile, we've just kind of been gradually grinding higher. Now there's been some setbacks, but it's just kind of been a gradual grind up.
From those factors, what does your crystal ball tell you about the next 30 days? Do you think we'll continue to kind of grind higher at this point?
Yeah, so as we dig into that and really kind of look at that, I think it's going to be some pretty choppy action. I mean, if you really look at it, we're seeing hints of that happening on the corn market. We've seen it definitely happen on the wheat market. And as you kind of dig in and look at that, if you look at that, you'd say, well, what's going on out there? Well, U.S. planting progress, you know, that's a big item. You know, we're sitting at about 70% planted on the corn. That would have been, as of this past Monday, about 52% on beans. A lot of acres left to plant yet. And the market's trying to size up, really what it's doing is trying to say, can we end up having a decent sized crop based off of when we're getting this crop planted? So I think we still got some more in this market to kind of grind us a little bit higher here yet. It's not going to be a straight up path. But then the thing we have to remember, at a certain point in here, when the market does think we've kind of built in enough premium, our moisture situation's a lot better than it was, and this crop's getting put in okay. So that can still mean some pretty good sized crops, you know, out there down the road.
Here early in our conversation, I want to get to a viewer question that came in. It was kind of fascinating. A viewer wrote in saying, okay, he heard a commodity broker saying, watch out, because if the funds do buy this, the market's going to rally. But the viewer expressed some frustration, saying, well, how are we supposed to know what the funds are going to do? Your thoughts?
Well, that's a great point. You know, we talk about that a little bit on show, but let's kind of break that question apart. So first of all, when we talk about the funds, generally what we're talking about is the speculative traders, and in particular what we're talking about is the trend following or the managed money. And what that is they're trying to buy the market when the market looks like it's going to go up. They're trying to sell it if they think it's going to go down. So our first hint to what they're doing actually comes out every Friday, and that's in the Commitment of Traders report. That traders report comes out, and basically the traders of a certain size are required to report their positions, or the brokers report their positions, and we keep track of that. And so for instance, this past Friday, and keep in mind when that report came out this past Friday, those results were as of the previous Tuesday. And what it said is that really the funds on the corn side were short the market about 71,000 contracts. Keep in mind each contract is about 5,000 bushels. They were short 42,000 contracts of soybeans, and they were short 28,000 contracts of wheat. So we can monitor those positions each week, but what they've been doing, and the trend is more important. So they've been physically buying back this market. And a key thing to kind of think about is that why have they been buying it back? Well, we're coming into that time of the year where you don't necessarily want to be short that market, because if you're short that market, it keeps going up, you're going to physically get hurt on the price side. So what they've been doing is they've been buying it back, but a couple triggers or things to look for is that if they were in and around the 100-day moving average, you know, basically of what the prices have been over the past 100 days, and you look at what that average is, you know, if we break through that and go higher and they're short, they're going to have a tendency to continue to buy that market back. And that's exactly what we ended up seeing across corn, soybeans, and over on the wheat side. But on the wheat, we got to see something else. We got to see them break through that 200-day moving average. And when they break through the 200-day moving average, that's a point where you can generally see the funds sometime then start to build, in this case, a long position. So that kind of gives you a little insight to kind of how they're thinking, Bryce.
Well, let's get to where you think, kind of back where we were a second ago, where you think all this is going. In particular, you watch the USDA reports as those come out. If things hold true when it comes to their supply and demand reports, where could the price for corn and soybeans be headed?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question. So I'm going to break it apart a couple different ways. So I'm going to take this and say, okay, if we take basically 90 million acres of corn and use 181 bushels the acre, just like they ended up using in the May WASDE report, and we get out to harvest, and we're able to achieve that, and demand is about as expected, Bryce, unfortunately, we'd probably be looking at about $4 December corn futures if that all happened. Now, the market wouldn't go right there right away, but that's what we'd be looking at. Then over on the bean side, if you use 86.5 million acres of soybeans and use a 52 bushel the acre, a lot of debate could happen on each of those. What that would suggest is about $11 futures on the November side when we get out there to harvest time.
So that said, back present day, we did see this bit of a rally over the past 30 days. Should we be making some sales on new crop?
Yeah, I do believe there's a couple things. So let's break that question apart. And I'm going to broaden it out a little bit on you. I'm going to add the old crop into it too. So on the old crop here, yeah, on this move that we're having right now, we do need to be making some sales. Not necessarily today, but on any little sign of weakness we get in this, we do need to be making sales. You know, getting up there in that 75% sold area, or maybe a little bit more on that old crop. And then on the new crop side, as we get up higher on this move, yeah, we do need to also be making sales there. And I'll just throw wheat in there. We probably are at a point where we need to be cleaning up some of that old crop wheat that you might still have around. And since wheat harvest isn't very far away for us, we probably need to also be making some new crop sales there too, Bryce.
My thanks to Jeff for joining me on the desk. Coming up next week, we'll be joined by Todd Holtman from DTN. It's a balancing act, applying phosphorus correctly to give the crop an available source when it's needed without over-applying. It can be tricky business. Several strategies, though, can be deployed when considering phosphorus, including deficiency correction, crop removal, or maintenance, as well as building. You can learn more about phosphorus in the most recent issue of the Nebraska Farmer. Check your mailbox. Well, it's now time for weather with Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Eric Hunt. Eric saw some good moisture in parts of the state, and as I mentioned, though, too much rain and hail across other portions. How are things shaping up as we turn to the week ahead?
Thanks, Bryce. Unfortunately, I'm seeing a little bit of the same thing this next week coming up. Starting off on Saturday, we'll have a decent trough moving into the central U.S. That is going to bring another chance of severe weather, particularly across south central and southeastern Nebraska. Highest threats to our south. And the heavier precipitation right now is currently expected to be to our south and to our east, although parts of southeastern Nebraska and east central Nebraska will be under the gun for potential for another inch to 2 inches of rain if the system ends up being a little bit further north when it was currently projected. Again, this is Thursday. If by Saturday this ends up being a little bit further north, then we can shift all this to the north and northwest just a little bit. That would give us some places that really don't need another inch of rain, another inch of rain. We should get a little break here at midweek as we'll be under the influence of ridging. That will bring some warmer temperatures, particularly to the western portion of the state where we could actually use a little bit more heat. But as we move toward the later portion of the week, we'll be back in more zonal flow, and with some influence from the Gulf of Mexico, we are going to see chances of precipitation by Thursday and Friday and into Saturday. Kind of difficult to pinpoint now just exactly where to get some of this precipitation. We are definitely looking at some precipitation amounts, probably on the order of a half inch to another inch across a good portion of the state. So again, I don't see a 3 or 4 day stretch in a row of dry weather coming up anywhere in the state this coming week. The CPC keeps us wet into the first portion of June, first part of June for pretty much the entire state. And the European model also keeps at least the south central and southeastern portion of the state relatively wet through the first week of June. GFS keeps a little bit of that more to the south, but again, definitely not showing any real dry signal. We are looking at being a little bit above average across the western portion of Nebraska and probably right around average in the eastern portion of the state as we head into the early part of June. Precipitation this last week, so again, we saw some very needed precipitation here across portions of southwestern Nebraska and the southern panhandle where we really kind of needed it. This was not needed, and we certainly didn't need 6 to 8 inches of rain. So again, there are some places around Cedar Bluffs and Fremont that had 8 inches of rain between Monday night into Tuesday. And of course, we had situations like this around Wahoo with significant flooding. We did see some improvement on the drought monitor, no surprise, across areas where we did see tremendous precipitation. A little bit of degradation here across Lincoln and Keith counties where you just kind of keep missing out on the rain. But in general, where we did get some good rains, we did see some improvement this last week. We are now down to under 7% of the state in drought, which is probably the best we've been in almost 4 years. As we'll measure, again, we are very, very wet across a lot of the Highway 30 corridor into Iowa, Minnesota, and across north central Nebraska. Again, this time of year, we don't want to be in the red. We don't want to be in that much blue either. So that's way, way too wet. Rangeline conditions are generally speaking are pretty good across the eastern portion of Sand Hills. A little bit drier here across the western portion of Sand Hills. Now, again, this was before we had some of that precipitation earlier this week, so it'll be interesting to see if we do see some improvement depicted here in the western portion of the Sand Hills. But again, we've kind of been going a little bit of the wrong direction here in the last month or so with regards to precipitation. Soil temperatures across the state right now are mostly in the 60s. We do have a few low 70s here across portions of southeastern Nebraska and a few mid 50s to low 60s here across portions of the Panhandle. And again, our temperature precipitation roundup, again, we had 8.65 inches of rain at one site in Bennington, and only 300ths of an inch in Philly down in Gage County. So quite the range of precipitation. Again, this is actually not that far apart in terms of mileage. And again, we had a range of temperatures from 92 in Culbertson to 29 in Bushnell. Thanks, and back to you, Bryce.
Alrighty, thank you, Eric. Finally today, earlier this month, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Yider Institute hosted a fireside chat with the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry for Canada. During that event, the director of the Yider Institute, Jill O'Donnell, and the minister discussed some different trade issues as well as geopolitics. Market Journal's Bill Dodd was covering that event for us. He joins us now to bring us this story. Bill?
I wanted to ask you what
The University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Clayton Yider Institute of International Trade and Finance strives to connect academic disciplines related to law, policy, business, and agriculture to prepare students for leadership roles in international trade and finance. Recently, the Institute hosted Canada's Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry to discuss geopolitics, U.S.-Canada trade, and how Nebraska fits into that picture during a public fireside chat.
That was really a chance to highlight the level of economic integration between the United States and Canada that already exists, and also consider some opportunities for strengthening that integration. This is really a time when geopolitics are prompting a lot of countries to think about how that might impact their trading relationships, who they trade with, what their supply chains look like. And with Canada just to the north of the United States as a longtime ally and trading partner, the guest that we highlighted during this visit really spoke a lot about different ways that this economic integration we've already had for many, many years between our two countries can be further strengthened. That Canada is really the #1 destination for Nebraska exports, and Canada is also the #1 source of imports for the state of Nebraska. So it's a really important trading partner for Nebraska, and many of those exports that we send to Canada are related to agriculture. We also send about $50 million a year in insurance services to Canada, so services exports also really important there. So I think simply reminding people of that fact is really important and was an important part of this discussion. You talk about seizing the moment.
One of the many topics addressed during the minister's appearance was the fast-paced nature and ever-changing landscape of geopolitics and technology, and the importance of seizing upon the opportunities found during these moments of change.
And I can tell there's 3 things which are top of mind and very relevant for Nebraska and very relevant for the Midwest and the United States. It's food security, energy security, and supply chain resiliency. You know, if you look at the world today, the world is going through a period where there's a lot of challenges. You're talking about inflation, you're talking about war in Europe. Something that I must say, in my days, I thought that after the fall of the Berlin Wall, I felt we were all on the same boat, on the same river. You know, trade was, the trade agreement we had that provided peace, stability, and prosperity. And suddenly that is upended now. And in terms of the institution that you serve, for example, NATO, the World Trade Organization, I think we're in a redefinition of a number of these institutions that we built after the Second World War. So what keeps me awake at night is really to seize the moment. I think that, I know physicists in the university chancellor would disagree with me, but I feel that time has accelerated. It feels like that, at least. That things are just happening more quickly, and you have to react, you have to adapt, and you have to be seizing these opportunities that present. There's 2 megatrends if you look at the economy. You have the decarbonization of the economy, and you have the digitization of the economy. So AI, quantum, cyber, and all that. On the other end, decarbonization, I look, for example, at what has happened in different states, a good part in the Midwest, this electrification, for example, of vehicle, these things only happen once in a generation. I feel like if you seize it at the right moment, you're going to be part of that new industrial revolution that we're living. And sometimes I feel like, when people are saying, do you think it's really going to happen? I feel like the man in a buggy looking at Model T of Ford and saying, is that really going to work? Yes, and certainly, I think that for Nebraska, I was saying that, Nebraska has the privilege to be centrally located, be able to address one of the key things, which I was thinking about food security.
Partnership a year earlier in 2017.
The conversation covered several different topics and ideas on how the U.S. and Canada could improve their global footing and trade relationships. However, the most important part of the conversation was its public setting and the opportunity for university students and public citizens to learn and engage in the discussion as well.
I think these conversations really allow Nebraskans, our students here in the university, anyone who's interested, members of the public, to get a chance to interact with people, foreign sitting officials who are in a position to shape their country's policies, because those policies do impact the United States, they impact Nebraska. And so having the chance to meet people like this at this level with this kind of authority and influence is really critical. It builds lines of communication between citizens of our state and our students and others in foreign countries, and kind of helps build more understanding and then a level of trust as well. When you've gotten to shake someone's hand and hear from them directly and ask them a question, in person about some important matter, I think that really only strengthens relationships over the long run.
Living in an ever-evolving geopolitical landscape requires minute-to-minute thought and communication from our elected representatives, and deserves the full attention of university students and the general public as well. This fireside chat and other similar events hosted by UNL's Yider Institute are always great opportunities to accomplish just that. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Now, if you'd like to hear the details of that fireside chat in its entirety, you can view the discussion online by visiting the Yider Institute. Their website is Yider, that's with a Y, -institute.unl.edu. We'll also post a direct link if you don't know how to spell Yider, along with this video. Find that over on the Market Journal website. That is going to do it for this week's broadcast. Before we go, reminder, you can catch all of our broadcasts and the individual stories by visiting the Market Journal YouTube page. We're also active on various social media channels, so we encourage you to look up the Market Journal team and like and follow our pages. We hope to see you back here next time, but until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.